Canadian. You know. I'm interested in surveys, so I'm going to start this one with a very basic question. So I want a show of hands. How many of you believe in aliens? Aliens. Well, it looks like somewhere around 40 to 50%. Yeah, the jury's out as usual. Sounds a bit like Brexit, doesn't it? Well, no, I'm serious. Some years ago, when returning from the European continent, my flight landed at Heathrow Airport in London. There were 3 queues for arriving passengers to use. The first was for British nationals, the second was marked other EU nationals, and the third had the beguiling description of aliens. Well, as a Canadian, this was the right cue for me to follow. So, you see before you an alien. But I'm sure you would agree you could not be much more alienated than a Canadian. And the most important bit about any lecture is getting their attention early, because if you don't, you won't. Lead me from the unreal to the real. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. The preceding quote is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And we read in the introduction the following. The world existed first as seed, which, as it grew and developed, took on names and forms. As a razor in its case, or as fire in wood, so dwells the Self, the Lord of the universe, in all forms, even to the tips of the fingers. Yet the ignorant do not know him, for behind the names and forms he remains hidden. When one breathes, one knows him as breath. When one speaks, one knows him as speech. When one sees, one knows him as the eye. When one hears, one knows him as the mind. All these are but names related to his acts. And he who worships the Self as one or another of them does not know him, for of them he is neither one or another. Wherefore let a man worship him as the Self, and as the Self alone. The perfection, which is the Self, is the goal of all beings. For by knowing the Self, one knows all. He who knows the Self is honored of all men and attains to blessedness. Now, ever since man crawled out of the primordial slime countless millennia ago, the greatest minds have searched for a definite explanation of the nature of reality. A recent issue of Philosophy Now magazine ventilated the subject in the question of the month, asking readers to proffer their input on what is the nature of reality. And here follows a collection of snippets to this central philosophical question. We need to tell the difference between hard ground and marsh that only looks hard. We need to know whether something is a bear or only a child with a bearskin rug over its head. We have evolved to tell the real from the false, injure the brain, and the victim may lose their sense of reality. When you have influenza, the familiar world can seem unreal. The real is the genuine, the reliable, what I can safely lean on. It is akin to truthful, valuable, even delightful. Its opposite is not illusion, but the fake, the counterfeit, that which cannot be trusted, has no cash value. Theatre, television, paintings, and literature deal in illusion, but can be real in the sense that they nurture and enlarge us, help us to make sense of experience. Electrons, energy, valency, and spin are real insofar as the scientific structure they form part of explains what we experience. Phlogiston no longer makes sense, so it has lost its claims to reality. As a banknote, which goes out of circulation, becomes merely a piece of paper. Another contributor gives the following: the problem, what is reality, arises from a consciousness of ourselves as living in a world which seems to be outside of, and yet is the cause of our conscious life. Our reflections on this lead us to wonder if we can know of the world beyond our perceptions, the underlying cause of our consciousness of appearances. This world of the underlying cause we call reality. If reality is mental, we might best connect with it by skillful introspection, by a pure, deep, and penetrating way of thought that would see past appearances and show reality directly to the mind. Alternatively, we might passively receive, by a process of revelation, a mental image of reality. In revelation, the cosmic mind could speak directly to us in apparitions or visions. If ultimate reality is instead composed of matter and energy, the method recommended is more empirical, that is, more reliant on the senses. This method, which we call science, involves the formulation of statements of proposed facts, i.e. observable truths about the physical, along with statements about relationships between the facts in the form of physical laws. Revelation resists and endures because science gives scant comfort to the desire for unification with cosmic reality. Another reader gives the following: in discussing the nature of reality, we must distinguish between physical reality and immaterial, i.e. non-physical reality. Physical reality is that which is constrained by physics or physical laws. Immaterial reality then pertains to what is not constrained by physical laws. Examples, concepts such as character and the mind. Plato's forms, the realm of God and spirits. If physical reality is all that is real, then what is the relationship of immaterial concepts, such as character, the good, and morals, to this physical reality? And yet another view. Reality is the independent nature and existence of everything knowable, whether it is knowable by logical inference, empirical observation, or some other forms of experience. Reality's existence and nature are independent because reality does not depend on our mind's apprehension of it to continue to exist or maintain its character. Consider Kant's idea of the thing in itself, that aspect of existence always outside of our perceptions of it. In Kant's view, we can never truly know reality in itself, what he called the noumenal world, because we are limited to our mind's imposition of fixed categories of knowledge upon our perceptions of it, thus giving us what Kant would call phenomenal knowledge. So it would seem we are forever cut off from reality as it is in itself, that is, distinct from our mind's apprehension of it. Therefore, genuine knowledge of reality would have to be direct knowledge of the object itself. And so reality itself, comprising the independent nature and existence of everything knowable, exists independently of our mind's apprehension of it. At best, perceptions are not that which we know. Rather, perceptions are that by which we do know. And while much of reality is a shared conceptualization, a great deal of it is personal to the individual. For reality is how we describe the world. It is how the world seems to be. Therefore, the foundation of a reality is our language use. What we know of the world, we can only know through language. And as our language is subject to change, so too is our reality. When Harvey discovered that blood circulates, he did not discover red and white corpuscles or plasma, but through corpuscles and plasma existed as part of the perceived world, they were not realized. They held no place as conceptual elements of reality. Realization is an act of discovery governed by language use. New Guinea tribesmen who have only two basic colors, light and dark, have a different apprehension of reality to us. They live in the same world we do, and they are capable of receiving the same impressions, but their reality is different from Europeans, as their language use obliges them to divide the world into different categories. And how does reality appear to us? What are the circumstances that could cause one's reality to be different from another's? People who have never seen can have their own sense of reality, which may be vastly different to that of a sighted person. They may have an internal non-visual visualization of bodily form, for example, which if drawn or created could be completely different from what is normally visually perceived. How different would an insect or animal's perception of reality be to ours? A fly, for example, will have a distorted, to us, representation of its visual stimuli, caused by the need for the fly to be aware of different aspects of its surroundings. In a dream state, situations often occur which seem absurd when awake. Therefore, we seem to have a dual existence, one conscious and the other subconscious. The subconscious state can seem as real as the waking state to a person who is dreaming or having a nightmare. How often is it that you wake and then go over your dream to realize that some of the things you were doing are impossible? Or are they? Alternate realities can now be induced by wearing computerized headsets, which can place a person inside a virtual reality. As graphics become more sophisticated, will this visualization always be distinguished from actual reality? Reality is a simulation in a very real way. We live in a reality like that portrayed by the Matrix film. All the sensory information you have heard about the world, according to our best scientific understanding, comes to you as electrical impulses. Your brain uses this information to produce a highly elaborate simulation. It produces a 3D colored representation of something that's almost certainly not colored in itself. It may not even be 3D, but it bears some relationship to reality. Take a fighter pilot as an example. If she looks out the window at 700 miles per hour, all she may see is a mist of darkness, obscured blur whizzing past her window. If she looks down at her instruments, however, she is provided with a much more useful reality simulation. A radar screen tells her where she is in the world and what is coming up far beyond her real vision. A topographical display and night vision goggles help her to see the ground she is flying over. Our normal simulation of reality aids us in the same way. We live in a simulation, yes, but it is not a lesser reality, it is an enhanced reality. Problems only come about if we, as the pilot, start to think the radar screen or night vision goggles are the only true way to see the world, and confuse our representation of reality with reality itself. From the perspective of modern physics, the chairs we use are not solid at all, but are comprised mostly of space. In consequence, we not only sit down more cautiously, but have become really quite relaxed with the notion that our day-to-day construction of reality may be largely illusory, varying not only from person to person, but from one era and culture to another, and most notably between species. Plato's cave allegory would not get him onto any chat shows today. It may not even have been big news way back in 4000 BC. The trouble is he fudged the issue, because the reflections in the cave were distortions of real people, carrying their various burdens past the mouth of the cave. By contrast, Heraclitus, a couple of centuries earlier, was making the more challenging suggestion that everything is flux. Nothing permanently is. There are no beings at the mouth of the cave. What we think of as things, as stable objects, are really in constant transition. They are processes, and ourselves are the same. Now, there is something called the theory of reality. This is a comprehensive new theory regarding the nature of consciousness and the nature of the universe. The innermost essence of ourselves, according to this theory, is pure consciousness, which is the innermost essence of all that exists. And back to one of Blavatsky's favorite writers, Plato. What did he think was the ultimate nature of reality? Well, he believed that phenomena is formed of fragile and weak forms of reality. They do not represent an object's true essence. Plato believed that there was a higher realm of existence accessible only through using your intellect to go beyond your senses. The universal forms exist in this higher realm. Now, as we've mentioned science, and particularly quantum physics, perhaps this might be useful to consider. One of the most bizarre premises of quantum theory, which has long fascinated philosophers and physicists alike, states that by the very act of watching, the observer affects the observed reality. When a quantum observer is watching, quantum mechanics states that particles can also behave as waves. Another question in this realm: what's his appearance and reality in philosophy? Appearance in philosophy, in other words, what seems to be, i.e. things as they are for human experience. The concept usually implies an opposition between the perception of a thing and its objective reality. Similarly, Plato identified appearance with opinion and reality with the truth. And what is the meaning of appearance and reality? Appearance versus reality is one of the most common themes used in literature to this day, and has been explored in many ways. It is a broad topic which means something different to everyone. Phaedrus, a Roman poet, once said, "Things are not always as they seem. The first appearance deceives many." And again, what are Plato's three levels of reality? Plato, in his dialogues, presented a theory that there are three different levels of reality, one of which we live in and are aware of with the senses. The first level of reality contains the forms. The reality is completely impervious to time itself and will never change. You might ask, is there a difference between reality and our perception of reality? Reality, however, is not always a known, which is where perception of reality comes in. While reality is a fixed factor in the equation of life, perception of reality is a variable. And that is why it's so important to learn to differentiate between a principle and an opinion. Turning to Theosophy, we read in The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, pages 14 to 17. The Secret Doctrine establishes three fundamental propositions, the first of which is an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, on which asserts that all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. It is beyond the range and reach of thought. In the words of the Mandukia, it is unthinkable and unspeakable. There is one absolute reality which antecedes all manifested, conditioned being. This infinite and eternal cause, dimly formulated in the unconscious and unknowable of current European philosophy, is the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever shall be. It is, of course, devoid of all attributes, and is essentially without any relation to manifest finite being. It is beingness rather than being, and is beyond all thought or speculation. So what is this concept of illusion? What if theory suggests that the world is an illusion? Well, there isn't one unified theory, but a strain of thought that has recurred many times and in many different forms in the world of philosophy. Some, as we already have alluded, are found in the writings of Plato, who viewed the ordinary material world as an imperfect copy or reflection of a more true reality, composed of ideal elements, perhaps most memorably explained in the allegory of the cave. In Bishop Berkeley's claim that the entire world is contained in the mind of God, and in Descartes' Meditations, where he considers and discards the notion that the sensible world is an illusion created by a malign demon. There are also elements of this point of view in Hindu and Buddhist philosophy, as well in the Taoist writings of Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu. Now, Chuang Tzu, or Chuang Zhao, was one of the most significant interpreters of Taoism. His classic work, Zhuangzi, is considered one of the definitive texts of Taoism, and is thought to be more comprehensive than the Tao Te Ching, which is attributed to Lao Tzu, the first philosopher of Taoism. Zhuangzi's teachings also exerted a great influence on the development of Chinese Buddhism. And the complete relativity of his perspective is forcefully expressed in one of the better-known passages of the Zhuangzi. Once I, Zhuangzhao, dreamed that I was a butterfly and was happy as a butterfly. I was conscious that I was quite pleased with myself, but I did not know that I was Zhao. Suddenly I awoke, and there I was, visibly Zhao. I did not know whether it was Zhao dreaming that he was a butterfly, or the butterfly dreaming that it was Zhao. Between Zhao and the butterfly, there must be some distinction. This is called the transformation of things. More recently, variants of this idea formed the nucleus for the movies Inception and The Matrix. Inception, released in the UK in 2010, stars Leonardo DiCaprio, who plays a thief with the rare ability to enter people's dreams and steal secrets from their subconscious. The Matrix, which came out in 1999, has as its review, how would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world if you didn't awake from the dream? So goes the question posed in The Matrix. Is life real or an illusion? Late in the 21st century, the story goes, man has developed artificial intelligence, referred simply to as the machine. The machines take control of Earth, man fights back, but in the resulting power struggle, the world is decimated, and the machines win. It's only a story, but is it? The entirety of Advaita Vedanta is about the view that no two things exist, i.e., nothing is real from an absolute point of view. And of course, there are other non-dualist teachings outside of Advaita that point to the same truth. Buddhism takes the perspective that the arising of things is founded in delusions, which result from cravings for things to be other than they are, which is found in misconceiving the nature of our world. The fundamental metaphor of Buddhism to attain awakening or enlightenment references leaving a sleeping state. In fact, the noted American psychiatrist David Hawking, recently deceased, devoted more than 50 years of his life to study of Buddhism and Advaita. In one of his more pithy observations, he remarked that 80% of the human race is completely asleep, and the other 20% is only awake some of the time. Something on which to ponder. We read in The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, page 287, this exchange between Hermes Trismegistus and Tatius. Hermes states, "Reality is not upon the earth, my son, and it cannot be thereon. Nothing on earth is real. There are only appearances. He, man, is not real, my son, as man. The real consists solely in itself and remains what it is. Man is transient, therefore he is not real, but he is but appearance, and appearance is the supreme illusion." Tatius replies, "Then the celestial bodies themselves are not real, my father, since they also vary." Trismegistus responds, "That which is subject to birth and to change is not real. There is in them a certain falsity, seeing that they too are variable." And Tatius asks, "And what then is primordial reality?" And the answer comes back, "That which is one and alone, O Tatius, that which is not made of matter, nor in any body, which has neither color nor form, which changes not, nor is transmitted, but which always is." In Indian philosophy, Maya is a spiritual concept connoting that which exists, but is constantly changing, and thus is spiritually unreal. And the power or the principle that conceals the true character of spiritual reality. And then we read about time and consciousness. Volume 1, 137 from the SD. "Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of duration." Time is only an illusion produced by the successions of our states of consciousness as we travel through eternal duration, and it does not exist where no consciousness exists in which the illusion can be produced, but lies asleep. The present is only a mathematical line which divides that part of eternal duration, which we call the future, from that part which we call the past. Nothing on earth has real duration. For nothing remains without change, or the same, for the billionth part of a second. And the sensation we have of the actuality of the division of time, known as the present, comes from the blurring of that momentary glimpse, or succession of glimpses, of things that our senses give us, as those things pass from the region of ideals, which we call the future, to the region of memories that we name the past. In the same way, we experience a sensation of duration in the case of the instantaneous electric spark, by reason of the blurred and continuing impression on the retina. The real person or thing does not consist solely of what is seen at any particular moment, but is composed of the sum of all of its various and changing conditions, from its appearance in the material form to its disappearance from the earth. It is these sum totals that exist from eternity in the future and pass by degrees through matter to exist for eternity in the past. Now, as we've already heard and are going to hear more about Maya, both yesterday and tomorrow, I think I will pass. It's simply to say, the general description is, Maya connotes a magic show, an illusion where things appear to be present but are not what they seem. It is a spiritual concept connoting that which exists but is constantly changing and thus is spiritually unreal. Well, after all of that, I hope you are clear, at least, as to what you are not. So we can begin discovery of what is the essence of being human and what signposts are displayed along the path to unlocking the truths of existence and travel to that place beyond illusion. An excellent introduction to the subject of the search for truth is provided in a rather innocuous little leaflet devised in the 1970s and revised in the 1980s by the TS in England by one of our giants of the past, Ianthe Hoskins. It asks the readers, do you ever ask yourself, who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? Each of these questions in itself justifies a lecture. And I believe Peter Barton did just that some 20 years ago, when he was at the helm of the English section. Simple the question may be, but the answers they produce are both profound and core to the whole journey of unfoldment. Who am I? Each and every one of us are part of one existence, which men call God. We are divine in origin and in our innermost nature. While the body is mortal, the spirit, the true self, is immortal. And the soul, the part of us which thinks and feels and regards itself as I, may win its immortality if it becomes the servant of spirit. We are here to discover what we really are and bring into activity all the powers that lie sleeping within us. As we're all part of the divine life, we contain all the attributes of divinity: infinite love, infinite wisdom, and infinite power. For most of humanity, the journey has only just begun, as Karen Carpenter once put it. But it's not a race or competition. We will have all the time necessary to ascend to those lofty peaks of our interior Mount Everest. We're going in the direction we have chosen, albeit by the higher self. probably eons ago. And most of the time driven by one's personality, we fall sway to various whims and moods, constantly at the mercy of the outside world. But in time, one tires of the roller coaster of external events and then takes adult responsibility for one's actions and moves consciously towards the goal of self-realization. The flip side of this leaflet outlines some facts about Theosophy, the ageless wisdom. Books may have their uses, but ultimately divine wisdom, which is truth, must be discovered in experience by each and every one for himself. In exploring the depths of our own being, like a flower, we unfold our essential divinity and come to knowledge of ultimate reality. Theosophy stands for the principles of existence. The Theosophical tradition affirms that all life is one life, that law pervades the universe, and that an evolutionary process is everywhere at work. In the human realm, these principles are expressions of the brotherhood of all mankind. The unfolding of possibilities through reincarnation under the law of karma and human perfectibility and self-transcendence. So now we have a map to begin our journey. Well, where do we start? Well, as Julie Andrews so aptly put it in The Sound of Music, at the very beginning. We have no choice but to start from where we are. Which reminds me of the story about the farmer in Ireland, who, when asked by an obviously lost tourist who had inquired about the best way to Tipperary, well, I would take the next turning on the left and travel 100 meters and then hang a right. But if I were you, I wouldn't start from here. You have to get them. As Frank Carson said, it's all how you tell them. As I said, each of the concepts outlined could warrant a lecture in its own right. But we have only time for a few brief pointers and observations. If you take the concept of brotherhood to its logical conclusion, then it should follow that every man is my brother, every woman is my sister. As it says in the Bible, do unto others what you would wish them to do unto you. Now, all of us fall short on this matter, and that is part of being human. And I'm not here to hector, but each of us has a myriad of ways in which we could serve our fellow man. And all sentient beings come to that, and the planet. Don't forget our four-legged friends. And many of you in this hall are already doing so. While it was a privilege to carve out a career as publicist of the Theosophical Society in England for over 3 decades, every job in life carries value and offers opportunities for service. And it's not just paid employment where value lies. My wife, Alana, rest her soul, would often remind me that raising a family is one of the most spiritual things you can do. I hope it doesn't sound too trite, but every encounter with others offers an opportunity for growth, whether in the world of work or leisure. Never underestimate the kindness of strangers. Like the 90-year-old woman at the bus stop outside Longbridge Station just yesterday I met, who provided me with the telephone number of a local taxi firm. And I must thank the citizens of East London for over a period of 20 years who consented to hour-long interviews about their shopping habits, which helped to pay my mortgage. And not to forget the people I met at bus stops and on trains who consoled me. Unofficial bereavement counselors after the sudden loss of my wife some 10 years ago. We could all be better listeners. I know I certainly could be. It's amazing how a kind word, a beaming smile, and perhaps a hug can change the outcome of a day for you and others. My girlfriend Linda maintains a gratefulness diary. Even though her MS confines her to a wheelchair, she does not consider herself a victim. Change yourself and you can change the world. As my wife used to ask, is your cup half empty or half full? Compared to the plight of most in this world, I think it's fair to say our cup in this room is overflowing with abundance, for which we should all be eternally grateful. Going short on food, not having a comfortable place to stay, and fearing for one's safety is a problem for many in the world. But spiritual poverty is an even bigger problem. The world today is full of conflict and insurrection. As an old Chinese expression would have it, we are living in interesting times. And certainly as the events currently unraveling in Kowloon, Hong Kong attest, these remarks are particularly apposite for the Beijing government. Whether these protests, which in some cases number hundreds of thousands at a time, result in more freedoms for those in this one-party state, or attract the sharp end of Chinese brutality as per Tiananmen Square some 10 years ago, remains to be seen. In the past month, Kashmir, a country who was co-administered by India and Pakistan, has been brought into sharp focus after the Delhi government decided on sole rule of the disputed territory. So far, the violence has been limited largely to burning of photographs of the Indian president. But with both nations possessing nuclear weapons, the potential for a full-scale conflagration is a possibility. Iran is rarely off the front pages of newspapers with its nuclear power arrangement with the West now in tatters. And while Syria has been pushed down the agenda for media coverage, the tragedy in the Yemen, with the two main factions of Islam, Sunnis and Shias, fighting for influence in the region, has ramped up more column inches in the past months in our daily newspapers. Closer to home, in France, for months there have been weekly demonstrations by what are referred to as the Yellow Vests, people who are protesting against austerity measures by the Paris government. And the ongoing economic battle between Washington and Beijing, with its tit-for-tat imposition of trade tariffs, has created increased uncertainty for jobs and the stock markets throughout the world. In the United Kingdom, we're enjoying a double whammy of bad news economically at the moment. The FTSE 100 of the largest companies operating in London has dropped 500 points in just over a week, and the pound sterling could soon be at just parity with the euro. Pundits say that our beloved pound is perhaps the most undervalued strong currency on the planet. But when you think that our banknotes are comprised, all they're comprised of is basically a piece of paper, well now it's actually cotton, containing a picture of the most famous woman in the world, and nothing really behind it, like gold or silver, as used to be the case, then you can start to believe that everything, especially money, is one very large illusion, a magic trick. Until 1972, the American dollar was backed by gold or silver bullion, not perhaps 100%, but at least something tangible. And when the Nixon government decided to leave the gold/silver standard, overnight the USA went from being a creditor to a debtor nation. And I think we know to whom, don't we? About 10 years ago, our own government sold about half of our gold reserves when the value was far lower than the current $1,000 an ounce it currently fetches, eroding further our cache of rainy day money to underpin our trade deficits with the rest of the world. I think we now have a national debt of about $2 trillion, the worst of the G7 economies, with the exception of Japan. It must be a great relief to know that at least one other major country is even worse off. And then we move on to the fiasco called Brexit. Our outgoing Prime Minister may indeed get the last laugh if all the bluff and bluster emanating from the new clown prince all goes terribly pear-shaped when we crash out of the EU with no deal. The government in particular and the Parliament in general has not been so divided since World War II. And what is missing from any discussions is the willingness to compromise, which is perhaps the first rule of all trade in the world of business. And if, as predicted, there's a further turn down in the British economy after Brexit, it will be the same group that make the ultimate sacrifices in war, namely the youth.
Well, could you wind it up?
5 minutes?
5 minutes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is more than a crying shame, because they are the future, who are full of optimism, which turns to pessimism in the over 50s. As my girlfriend quotes, patience is a virtue rarely in a woman, never in a man. I have more faith in Messrs. Jagger and Richard to run the British economy than this current motley collection of old Etonians. After all, Mick Jagger is a graduate of the London School of Economics and knows a thing or two about making money. 4 of the highest yielding music tours of the past decade have been by the Mouldy Bones. Not bad for a quartet that is collectively twice the age of the Theosophical Society, which was founded in 1875. And while critics will say about the Stones' touring days that this could be the last time or it's all over now, I would like to bet they'll be still strolling in their 80s long after the current lot in Downing Street are just a memory. As Tim Wyatt says in his excellent publication, Cycles of Eternity, about glamour, we live in a glitzy and often amoral world, oozing questionable values and hollow goals, and which is largely ruled by the false gods of money and materialism. The threadbare celebrity culture of today, which preoccupies so many people, has totally debased the ideals of outstanding achievement, especially since so many so-called celebrities have achieved nothing except inflation of their own egos. There is an expression that work maketh the man, and I'm inclined to believe it. Everyone needs to feel valued. Money is useful, and a certain amount will find its way back to the treasury if people are fully employed. But the most important thing is that employment gives one dignity, a purpose for living. And if you haven't got that, what have you got? Nothing at all. It's a bit like love. Everyone needs it. We have many grave concerns on our plate at the moment, and one, perhaps, which focuses the minds of both rich and poor is the environment. The excellent wildlife programs by our favourite grandfather, Sir David Attenborough, have brought into sharp focus the calamity facing us all if we do not do something major now to improve our ecosystems. Every year, dozens of species of animals or plants disappear from our planet, at least partially down to the practices that are detrimental to the environment. You've all heard of the lingering deaths of fish who have ingested plastics in our oceans, something for which every one of us must take responsibility. In London, many children are now dying because of air pollution, largely because diesel has been the fuel of choice for drivers of cars and lorries. And just a week ago, Google News reported in an article about the disappearing ice cap of Greenland. A chunk of ice the size of France has recently melted into the adjoining seas, which will no doubt impact on the coastline of neighbouring countries with possibly calamitous effects. But all is not doom and gloom. No one could have imagined even 25 years ago that most people would own or afford to own a mobile phone. Much more than just something to telephone your friends or businesses, it is a portable computer, allowing you the ability to quickly access useful information on the web, pay bills, watch films, and even take photographs. A bit like magic, you might say. We can now travel to other countries quickly by plane or train at a fraction of the cost in real terms of years gone by, and with a frequency that is unprecedented. While many bemoan the so-called failure of the United Nations, along with the Red Cross and similar altruistic organizations, they have improved the lot of the dispossessed from areas of war and victims of natural disasters like earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, and floods. And one should not forget the initiatives of individuals themselves. After the worst to date tidal wave of 10 years ago in the Indian Ocean, the British government pledged to match pound for pound the donations of the man in the street. In the end, the Treasury had to dig far deeper than planned because of the unexpected generosity. As a nation, Britain donates 0.7% of our budget to funding foreign aid, which puts us very high on the list of countries in the world. What we are really talking about that's missing in this world is being connected. Just because one's retired is not the end of the world. You might now find you have time to do things that being employed prevented you from doing, like long-distance travel or even visiting your friends and relatives. Strange. It also gives you time to give voluntarily to organizations requiring help, like charity shops, hospitals, etc. They say that people who are helping others rarely feel lonely. For a start, you've got out of the house and are meeting other people. We are, after all, social animals. Above all, as Theosophy would suggest, we are on a journey of self-discovery. Through study and reflection, we come to realize we're part of this one great existence. We have lived many times and will return to this or another plane of manifestation to work out incomplete areas of our makeup. Through the agency of karma, we will iron out any deficiencies in future lives. And this we will do with others that we have known before. No doubt I shall again meet my beloved Alana, who was taken so quickly from me when she was just 57. Hopefully in the next life she will again be my wife and not the milkman. And by then I trust I will have transcended my fiery temper, which has been one of my Achilles' heels in this life. Now to close on an upbeat with this quotation from Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. There is a road steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind, but yet a road, and it leads to the very heart of the universe. I can tell you how to find those who will show you the secret gateway that opens inward only and closes fast behind the neophyte forevermore. There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot conquer. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. There is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount. For those who win onwards, there is reward past all telling. The power to bless and save humanity. For those who fail, there are other lives in which success may come. Thank you for your attention.